Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 1268 of the Juicebox Podcast. Guys, Jenny is back, and she and I recently did a Facebook Live. This is the audio from it. So what does that mean? We got on the interwebs, and we talked to people who listen to the podcast. If you like this and you're not following the public Facebook group for the Juicebox Podcast or aren't a member in the private Facebook group, well, you might want to become one so you hear about this the next time it happens. Nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan. I know that Facebook has a bad reputation, but please give the private Facebook group for the Juicebox Podcast a healthy once-over. Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes. The group now has 47,000 members in it. It gets 150 new members a day. It is completely free, and at the very least, you can watch other people talk about diabetes. And everybody is welcome. Type 1, Type 2, gestational, loved ones, everyone is welcome. Go up into the featured tab of the private Facebook group, and there you'll see lists upon lists of all of the management series that are available to you for free in the Juicebox Podcast. Did you know if just one person in your family has type 1 diabetes, you're up to 15 times more likely to get it too? So screen it like you mean it. One blood test can spot type 1 diabetes early. Tap now, talk to a doctor, or visit screenedfortype1.com for more info. Today's episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Contour NextGen blood glucose meter. This is the meter that my daughter has on her person right now. It is incredibly accurate and waiting for you at contournext.com/juicebox. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Eversense. The Eversense CGM is more convenient, requiring only one sensor every 6 months. It offers more flexibility with its easy on, easy off smart transmitter and allows you to take a break when needed. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. Good morning, everybody. This is it. Usually Jenny and I look at each other and then we start a recording and then ask each other questions that you guys have sent in. So you're going to need to send some questions in or we're going to be in trouble pretty quickly.
We can't just keep saying good morning.
We could chat if you want, but
we could chat. Sure, yes.
I don't know how interesting.
How are you, Scott?
Yeah. I'm not sure how interesting that'll be for how long. So this is, Jenny, so you know, this is on YouTube. It is on Facebook, on the private group. It's in the public group, and it's on Twitch. So hopefully,
great.
I think I could put it on Instagram, but it's weird, so I didn't do it. I think you have to do it just to Instagram. Good morning, everybody. If you have questions, go ahead and put them up, okay? And if you are interested in hiring Jenny, you can email her at that link up in the corner. We'll put that up periodically. Also, let's everybody remind you that that's the disclaimer if you want to read it, but it says that nothing we say you can take as medical advice. So it also says a lot of other things. If you want to read it, feel free to read it. It's actually on juiceboxpodcast.com as well.
Good morning to everybody who's saying good morning to me. Good morning.
Hey, Susie, how are you? All right. So what do we have here? Should we pre-bolus for dessert if we already have insulin on board from a meal?
It's a great question. It's a question I get all the time.
You go ahead and go first.
Oh, okay. So I think it does differ, right? It differs for the content of the meal that you already had. And it also differs from, again, now we have directional from CGM information. So depending on where you're sitting, if you're already rising in the aftermath of that meal, then potentially it's a great idea to bolus, especially if it's a particularly simple carb type of dessert. Sitting down to cotton candy versus sitting down to, I don't know, something else that's higher fat cheesecake, for example, right? So I think it definitely depends. And then in terms of the piece here of should we pre-bolus for dessert, Not necessarily. Again, depending on where your blood sugar is sitting, it may depend on whether you need a pre-bolus or whether you watch a little bit of the meal kind of bolus that's already there play out, and then bolus right before you start to eat the actual dessert.
Right. So can I give, like, that was a very detailed answer. I'm going to give a little piece of it that I think of, which is obviously there are different scenarios. Jenny's just outlined a number of them. But overall, what you eat, generally speaking, needs insulin. So
Correct.
If you've made a terrific bolus for your dinner and your blood sugar's 85 and super stable, well, great job on the bolus from the dinner. Now you're about to eat something else again. It's time to probably pre-bolus that as well with a little bit, and then keep that train rolling nice and flat like that. Unless, of course, you've overestimated dinner and now, the dessert could be part of it, or underestimated it, and maybe the dessert plus a correction is needed.
Right. And that's again where I think the benefit of having a continuous monitor really comes into play.
Sure.
Because you have a little bit more, I think it's wiggle room to determine, do I need pre-bolus? Can I bolus because it's a really slow kind of dessert and it'll be okay? Do I employ the use of one of the smarter features like an extended bolus or something like that, along with, the meal bolus that's already there? I also had a really great conversation yesterday with somebody about the number on your CGM and the directional arrow.
Okay.
Versus really just looking at the trend line.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because I feel like the number on the CGM and the arrow, they go hand in hand. They're almost like a marriage, right?
How do you mean?
Meaning, if you go solely based on the trend arrow and the number, you may make a different decision in this question's example compared to what the trend line looks like.
Okay.
The trend line, you can think of it almost absent of a number.
Yeah.
Because the trend line, even if that, and a lot of people complain, oh, my CGM is off, the number is off from a finger stick when it's trending this way or it's going that way or the arrow is up or whatever. But the trend line itself isn't lying.
Right.
There's a decline happening, there's stability happening, there's a rise already happening. And so in this case, from do I pre-bolus or do I bolus at the meal or do I bolus after the dessert is eaten or whatever, the trend line can really help you there versus just looking at a number.
This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the only CGM you can take off to get into the shower, the Eversense CGM. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. Well, I mean, sure, you could take the other ones off, but then you'd waste a sensor and have to start over again. But not with Eversense. Eversense is a 6-month wear implantable CGM. So if you want to take a shower without anything hanging on you, pop off the transmitter, jump in the shower. When you get back out, put it back on, and you're right back to where you started. Come to think of it, you could do that whenever you wanted to. Maybe it was your prom night or your wedding day. Maybe you just don't want the thing on for a little while, but you don't want to go all through the hassle of taking it off and having to restart it and, starting back over with like wonky numbers and having to, all that goes with it when you take off a CGM and put it back on. Oh, but you don't have to do that with the Eversense CGM, because Eversense is the only long-term CGM with 6 months of real-time glucose readings. This gives you more confidence, more convenience, and flexibility. The Eversense CGM is there for you when you want discretion, a break, or maybe just a little adult time. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. Pop that transmitter off, pop it back on, you're right back where you started, without any wasted devices or time. Getting older means a world of change, but some things still stay the same, like being at risk for type 1 diabetes. Because type 1 can happen at any age, so screen it like you mean it. If just one person in your family has type 1, you're up to 15 times more likely to get it too. And 50% of type 1 diagnoses happen after the age of 18. So screen it like you mean it. Type 1 diabetes starts long before you need insulin, and one blood test could help you spot it early and lower the risk of serious complications like diabetic ketoacidosis, known as DKA. So don't get caught by surprise. Screen it like you mean it, because getting answers now can help you get prepared. The more you know, the more you can do. So don't wait. Talk to a doctor about how to get screened. Tap now or visit screenfortype1.com to learn more. Again, that's screenfortype1.com and screen it like you mean it. There have been times with the G7 that I know people got upset because they used to smooth the number out, like with software a little bit. So it kind of made you happier when you looked at it. But now I'm noticing that the direction of the line seems more accurate with what's actually happening.
Okay.
I don't know if you've seen that or not. It's like there'll be times where like you'll see, I don't know, like a down arrow. So like sometimes the arrow is indicating down, and at the same time, the number makes it feel like I'm moving in the other direction. And so I do tend to do exactly what you just said, which is put them both together.
Yeah.
And say that the arrow's telling me one thing, the line's telling me another thing.
Right.
You know, but this direction seems to be spot on.
Right.
Like the direction seems to be spot on for me.
Sure. And from that smoothing angle with G7, I think what I've seen is really that because they don't smooth, as you mentioned, right? G6, the data was smooth. So it was almost from my understanding, it was the system's algorithm looked at the data points preceding the current, and there was some averaging, which provided a smooth, that was going on to provide a smoothing into the next numbers you saw, whereas G7 took the smoothing out. And so each data point it's supposed to be an accurate one in and of itself, a data point. Yeah.
Emily says here, good morning. I had my son before I got type 1 diabetes. Is he still at higher risk of developing type 1 or another autoimmune?
See, I had my son before I got type 1.
Oh, I see what she's saying. Yeah, Emily, I don't think it changes. Autoimmune probably runs in your family. You know, like I think what's going to happen was going to happen whether you got type 1 before or after the pregnancy. The Contour NextGen blood glucose meter is the meter that we use here. Arden has one with her at all times. I have one downstairs in the kitchen, just in case I want to check my blood sugar. And Arden has them at school. They're everywhere that she is. ContourNext.com/juicebox. Test strips and the meters themselves may be less expensive for you in cash out of your pocket than you're paying currently through your insurance for another meter. You can find out about that and much more at my link, ContourNext.com/juicebox. Contour makes a number of fantastic and accurate meters, and their second chance test strips are absolutely my favorite part. What does that mean? If you go to get some blood and maybe you touch it and, I don't know, stumble with your hand and like slip off and go back, it doesn't impact the quality or accuracy of the test. So you can hit the blood, not get enough, come back, get the rest without impacting the accuracy of the test. That's right. You can touch the blood, come back and get the rest, and you're going to get an absolutely accurate test. I think that's important because we all stumble and fumble at times. That's not a good reason to have to waste a test strip. And with the Contour NextGen, you won't have to. ContourNext.com/juicebox. You're going to get a great reading without having to be perfect.
Correct. And really with the testing that we have now, depending on how old your son is, whether testing is an option yet or not for his age, that really is the best tracking that you can do for the potential. Now, there are other, and I think we talked about this when we talked about the thyroid episodes and that kind of stuff. There are antibody testing that can be done for a number of other autoimmune conditions, thyroid included there. So if you are concerned at all, that is one of the best ways that you can just keep up with checking.
Yeah. And actually, you'll hear in the last half of the year on the podcast ads for something called screenfortype1.com, which you could go to now, even though I don't have the ads up yet. It's literally screenfortype1.com. And you can look into that there about screening if you're worried. Brenda says, but you know what? Give me a half more second on that. I don't know that because you have type 1 diabetes means there's going to be more autoimmune or not. Like it's very likely no, and possibly yes. But you know, it at least gives you things to look out for. You start seeing tired behavior, you know, dry skin, hair falling out, you think thyroid, right? You know, like crazy weight gain, loss all of a sudden, lack of energy, etc. Like, ooh, are they drinking a lot? Maybe I should be looking for type 1. At least you know to look now.
Right. And even, you know, in kids, from a standpoint of celiac being another one that kind of is within that realm of autoimmune and kind of links in with type 1, kiddos who haven't been tested, they may be underweight. They may not gain. They may complain of tummy, like my tummy bothers me. Or, kids are not very descriptive in terms of their body stuff. Right. They just tell you something hurts. And it doesn't really mean very much unless they keep complaining about it. So those are things when there is autoimmune in the family that you know of, and or you have type 1, because celiac often pairs with that, it could be something you look at.
So Brenda said, how often should we wait to give insulin after my daughter ate? I'm thinking she means how long, but are you saying, Brenda, are you saying that you gave insulin and now there's another meal or a higher blood sugar, and how long do you wait? Are you trying to ask about stacking? You might have to clear that up for us. I'm going to go to the next one while she figures that out.
Okay.
Oh, she said long. I got her. Okay. How long?
Okay. So how long should you wait, really, to give insulin after your child eats? Or anybody, really, regardless of age, quite honestly, here. I mean, we have to remember the action time of our current day rapid insulin. The more rapid, like Fiasp or Lumjev, have a faster onset for most people and a faster finish. But in general, rapid insulin still has a timeline of action, as you have talked heavily about and we've discussed heavily, right? So how often should you give it, or when should you start to give extra? It really does, look like evaluating, did you count pretty precisely? Is it a pretty well-known meal? Should the rise that you're seeing not really be happening? And if it is, the question would be, well, goodness, you could probably give a little extra insulin. But again, that now bolus of extra still has its timeline to get moving.
Right.
So, I think in this, it's like I give and now, okay, I've given. How long do I wait to see if this is going to turn around? And that's waiting is the hardest thing, I think, with insulin use.
I always think that the part that you can never know, right, is did I do it right the first time? If I did and it's going up, then I need insulin. And if I didn't and the timing's off and this insulin's going to catch back up all of a sudden, I don't want to put more in there. I would say, Brenda, more than anything, as unsatisfying as an answer as this may be, is that with experience comes knowledge, and eventually you'll just do it. You'll just be like, "Ooh, I know what to do."
Right.
So good luck.
And that's why I brought in the idea of, is it a pretty typical meal?
Yeah.
Is this usually what you would see happen? And if it's not, my mind personally always starts to say, well, is it like close to the last day of my pump site?
Right. Like, is the pump old? Is, that kind of stuff. See, Brenda's newly diagnosed. Brenda, listen, I'm going to tell you something else too. Listen to the Bold Beginnings series if you haven't. And if you have, move on to the Pro Tip series. And I'll actually right now, I can give you in the top corner, there's the Bold Beginnings link if you haven't listened to it. Michelle, 14-year-old diabetic daughter, irregular menstrual cycle, using Loop and G7, sudden insulin sensitivity, and then resistance through the month. For example, will have a great day, then dinner bolus tanks her, and that's the start of 2 to 7 days of needing to half dose food. Oh, yeah. I would also listen to the Pro Tip series there, and we have a lovely episode on hormonal stuff. But
we do.
I mean, listen, Jenny, it feels inappropriate for me to go first, but my daughter has what I think of as 3 different implications throughout a month. She has an amount of insulin she needs about the 5 days before her period begins, the amount during the beginning of the period, and then at the tail end of it and afterwards. They all are different. Now, Loop will do a pretty good job with it. And I'm getting a little lazy now because IAPS is making adjustments for me as I go with the dynamic settings. But how do you talk to people about this in practice?
Yeah, in practice, I guess I give the general idea of what a typical cycle should be. And I also clear up the fact that your cycle is not just the bleed period. It's not just the men's, right? Females have let's call it a 30-day cycle of hormones. And so what you're describing here is the very normal thing that should be happening in a female body. Essentially, we call day 1 the first day of bleeding, right? The first day of the cycle period. And that oftentimes will be your most sensitive from about day 1 or 2. Maybe it starts 24 hours into the period starting, this increase in sensitivity. And that can often last for usually about 10 to 14-ish days, where a next cycle or a next cycle of hormones comes into the picture around ovulation. Ovulation happens when we're not on any type of birth control, not menopause or anything like that. So we've got ovulation. Around ovulation, it could be another cycle of resistance. It could be heavier than, as you described, Scott, the days before your daughter has her period. That's a time of some intense resistance as the body's hormone levels rise to either support the growing uterine lining if pregnancy is occurring, or a plumping up, and then the period starts and it sort of discards all of that, and then the hormone levels fall down. So that's why you have this rise fall in resistance versus sensitivity.
Right.
So you're not crazy in what you're seeing with your daughter. This is supposed to be happening. And it's really important that you also, discuss that with her. This is normal. We're going to adjust this way. So you might have with Loop, and I don't know what version of Loop you have. Some of the versions allow you to have multiple profiles set to choose from, and then for Loop to interact with. And some of the versions of Loop do not, where if you just have that one main profile, you may have to make adjustments to it by 10, 20, 30% more insulin, so that Loop then can work to its advantage for you by adjusting off of the higher needs or the lower needs. Loop also has those overrides that you can use a percent adjustment up and a percent adjustment down. But what you're seeing is normal.
That's all I did was the overrides with Loop.
Yeah.
I would just go a percentage higher. And then, it was uncomfortable because you have to say to your daughter, like, let me know as soon as your period starts, because we got to knock this off. And then it can really tail away at the end. And then it's so even strange to call it normal, because I think the whole thing is normal. Obviously, it's just, it's just sucks. But then the normal couple weeks comes at the end.
Right.
I'll say again, try the pro tip series. There's some great conversations in there about menstruation. Actually, I just put information up in the corner because a lot of people are asking about screening. So there's a link up in the corner here about how to get screened for type 1 for the rest of your family. So that's the answer to this question here. Colby wants to say something nice. Colby, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, we feel good about that. Don't worry. Let's say hi to you, Jennifer. And thanks. He's 10 months old and he'll do the antibody testing when he's old enough. Okay, that's Emily from a little while ago. Here's a question from the private group. Good morning. Which of the clinical trials would you want your daughter to sign up for if given the opportunity? Oh, that's for me.
That's me. I'm like,
I was like, Jenny doesn't have a daughter.
I have no girls.
Well, I'll tell you what, more recently, I'd sign her up for that GLP study in Austin, Texas that Dr. Blevins talked about on the podcast. That would be one, if she was really, really early diagnosed, maybe I would look at temizolol, right? I know I'm not pronouncing that correctly. That's one that I would think about. Tzield, is that what it's called now? Tzield?
Yep, Tzield.
If you were really newly diagnosed, I'd look at Tzield. But especially for a daughter, the impacts that I've seen a GLP medication have on Arden's insulin needs are significant. And if you're listening to the podcast, I think you can tell that I'm pretty high on the idea of it's going to help people. I would probably do that one. Austin, Texas, Dr. Blevins. There's a link in the private Facebook group somewhere for it. That's one I would look at. But I think you have to be in Austin. Other than that, which ones are you excited by, Jenny?
There are so many all over the place. Again, depending on where you are in diagnosis, that's really how you would search out studies that may be appropriate, both age and where you lie in diagnosis or post-diagnosis. Many of the studies that are being done are in the newly diagnosed. I find the studies easiest to find for those who've been diagnosed in the past 6 months.
Okay.
There are a lot of studies for siblings of children who have type 1 as well, especially if they are antibody positive, but yet to, reach that stage 3 sort of symptomatic type 1 really being there. I would usually look also at Jocelyn does a fair amount of studies. The Barbara Davis Center out of Denver, Colorado does a lot of different types of studies, both in children as well as in adults. There's the Diabetes Center, which is in Rochester, Minnesota. They have a lot of studies that come out of there. like the beta cell sort of testing. I know there are several studies that can't remember exactly where in Florida they do it, but they've got a number of the studies coming out from like transplants.
Another way to keep up with that for everybody listening is if you go to my link, t1dexchange.org/juicebox and complete the survey, you will get emails from them when they have stuff coming up. And that's a nice way to hear about things. The next question is, hi, what's the reason why my sugar goes up right when I change my sites? Oh, this is an easy one. And still goes up then like 20 minutes. I will see it come down. But before then, give myself insulin, T-Slim, and Dexcom.
I think we talked about it in one of the episodes.
Oh, for sure we have. Yeah. But Nellie, I think I recognize her thing. I think she might be a little new to diabetes. So couple of reasons that could be, first of all, there's kind of a little trauma that happens when you put the site in. It takes a little while for it to get going. Sometimes it has to soak in, right? You have to get some insulin in there to get it going. You also could be nervous while it's happening and not realize it and be getting a bump in your blood sugar from adrenaline. What else, Jenny?
Well, the resistance that comes with creating the trauma under the skin, I think the best way for people to see, like the light bulb often goes on if you were a G6 user and you had that 2-hour startup window. Mm-hmm. The real reason that that's there is because the sensor needed to get wet, or a lot of people call it marinating, right? Yeah. They even do it longer insertion time. But it really decreases then the inflammation at that trauma site, which allows both insulin to start getting absorbed the way that we would expect it to.
Right.
Another reason, though, often, and this is regardless of the type of insulin pump that you use or the type of infusion set, it really has to do with when you start up a new site, most people remove the old site because that's what you're taught to do. Mm-hmm. And what often happens, especially if you're one to change it right after a meal, often what happens is you pull that old site and it's wet. What that is leakage from the old site. The insulin that was under that area has not yet completely absorbed.
Right.
And so not only are you starting a new site that's now a little bit inflamed and not quite absorbing the way you hope it will, but now you're losing insulin from the other site. And so you're creating a deficit.
All those possible implications. So I think about simple ways to fix it is you can kind of flood the new site with a bolus when you first put it on. You can give a bolus for the rise is going to happen from the old pump before you take it off. If that site's still working well, leave the old site on for a while after you've bolused to make sure all the absorption happens. But I don't think people would realize about just like you're saying, like, you're causing a small wound. The body floods the area with like white blood cells and inflammation and everything. And it's just not a great host for the insulin right away.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I usually go about it. I mean, again, years ago myself, even before using the pump that I use, my old tubed pump, I found that pretty quickly after I started pumping that the old site had to be left in. I just disconnected from it, left it hang out there. And then to kind of start saturating that new site with insulin, I gave a little bolus with the new site to really encourage that site to start doing something.
Yeah. You guys are interested in hiring Jenny, you can click on that link in the top corner there and send her an email.
Thank you.
Oh, of course. Thank you. What are you kidding? Strategies, Dakota says, for bolusing for stress. Is there even a way? Sometimes my blood sugar rockets when I get to work. Not always, just sometimes.
Well, that's what I would. Yeah. This is not only for adults, but also for kiddos. There's a very big difference seen between heading to school, or I call it like foot in the door at school. So this might be foot in the door at work kind of thing. It may also be, depending on the type of job Dakota, it looks like, has. It really, is it a job where some days you have a lot of meetings to get to, you have to host something, you've got a project that's due that you've got to present, versus other days you just smooth into the office and you get rolling with the things that you need to do, but there's not really an adrenaline type of interaction. So you may want to look at what your work schedule looks like, pay attention to what your blood sugar does, and you can make some associations. In the moment, you can address it.
Yeah.
But if you want some historical to it to be able to say when and if you will need extra insulin, that's the best way to do it.
I can just tell you that, like, used to drive Arden to high school, and I'd look at her graph on the way out the door, and if it was going up, we'd get in the car and I'd say, just bolus. And she'd like throw a unit in just to go to school. And then she had very aggressive basal rates throughout the day at school that we had to kill. I could never stop them long enough. They were so aggressive during the day to keep her stable. Like there was not an early enough time to stop them. So I knew that when she left from school, there was a snack that had to happen in like 20 minutes, because as soon as she left school and all that adrenaline or nervousness or whatever left her blood sugar started to come down really quickly.
Right.
You know, it's really interesting, actually.
Yeah. There are a lot of kiddos that I get a chance to work with who the afternoon, after having things ramped up during the day, are much more aggressive, like bolus strategy.
Right.
Usually with the school day ending around 3 or 3:30, by about 1:30, we've started paring things down, because otherwise there was such a considerable drop that many kids could have an uncovered snack in the afternoon because of just that joy of, I'm done with school.
Yeah, no, it's really crazy. Arden used to eat for free in the afternoon for sure.
Yes.
Hey, Jonathan, how are you? Judah loved Dr. Blevins saying diabetes. Yes, he is a Texan for sure. There'll be a new episode with Dr. Blevins in 2 weeks, but next week you're going to get Jim, who is 58, got type 1 when he was 50. Antibodies, whole thing. He's got type 1, full-blown, using insulin and everything. Started Mounjaro, Jenny, and is off insulin completely right now. Has been for like a year and a half. Crazy story. Don't miss that one next week with Jim. He won't say diabetes, though. I'm sorry.
I know I listened to that episode, and as soon as he said it, I was like, oh my God, diabetes, no.
How knowledgeable is he, though? He can talk. He's off the top of his head just talking about those GLPs, man. Jeez.
Absolutely. That was why I didn't stop listening after he said diabetes.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm like, it's like a cringe.
I found him on YouTube. No
Did
kidding.
you? Wow.
He was doing a talking head on YouTube about GLPs, and I was like, this guy knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Jonathan said, question for Jenny. Have you heard of type 1 idiopathic type 1? Type 1B idiopathic type 1. Do you know it?
Yeah, off the top, I know it by name. I do know it by name. There are so many of these different classifications of type 1 that isn't specifically what we call just type 1, right? It is if I remember correctly, it's a MODY. It's one of the MODY types of type 1. But again, there are type 1C. I think there's type 1D. I think then it skips a bunch of letters, and there are a whole bunch of other
We did an episode
1s.
once where we went through all of them. It was mind-numbing.
We did, yes.
Yeah.
I can't remember which episode it was, but I do remember doing it. And I think there were a couple that you brought up that I hadn't even...
Yeah. Well, here, I went to our ChatGPT overlord. It said idiopathic type 1 diabetes, also known as type 1B diabetes, is a form of type 1 diabetes where the cause of insulin deficiency is not related to autoimmune response. Unlike more common, here are some key points about it. Insulin deficiency, non-autoimmune, heterogeneous group. This group can include various other causes of insulin deficiency, including genetic factors and other pancreatic issues. It's far less common than type 1A. That's what ChatGPT and Jenny knows about it. Jonathan, tell me why you asked that, Jonathan.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah. I mean, again, I would expect it's something to do with knowing you have this, which means that you had a really good doctor to actually catch that there was a difference.
Yeah.
Right. And or the question being, well, are there new therapies? Are there ways to navigate this? And I wonder also if maybe Jonathan was misdiagnosed initially as a type 2, given that there wasn't an autoimmune notable component, and with further testing, maybe, again, lots of questions.
Yeah. Karen says, my daughter tried Tresiba. She needed more bolus as expected. While she changed to the longer Tresiba profile, however, by day 3, she was in the hospital with high ketones and told to change back to her old long-lasting insulin. The only thing I can think of is there just wasn't enough. Or because that doesn't make any sense. Tresiba used correctly shouldn't end up with high ketones.
It should definitely not. And I'm wondering, again, lots of questions for things that come up like this. Is it that they adjusted the basal dose back from what the original base basal was, and thus you just needed to go to the real amount of basal insulin that you had been using? Or, again, in really rare cases, there are some people who just react very differently to one brand or type of insulin versus another. So again, it could certainly be that.
Your initial concern, though, is where my brain leapt to. Like, did they get really conservative on her when they switched? And maybe her daughter, like I'm guessing here, maybe her daughter started at one level, has increased over time, and then maybe they took it back to be safe and then didn't give her enough. I mean, I don't see why Tresiba would cause that. And it is a really good basal insulin.
Yeah,
So,
it is a very good. In fact, the majority of the older school people with type 1 who use Lantus, usually I highly recommend that they switch to Tresiba.
She said it was the same amount as Levemir.
Oh.
Oh,
that's interesting.
It sounds like she used more bolus too.
That is really interesting.
But see, though, like, do you really think that you would expect to need more bolus if you went 1-to-1 change from Levemir to Tresiba? No, I feel like it means she needed more basal with the Tresiba.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, all questions, right, that you ask, is this daughter going through a menstrual cycle at the time of the change?
Yeah.
Is there
she's
a
3.
growth? Oh, she's 3.
No, hold on. No, I'm sorry. She's not. Day 3.
Day 3.
This is just the time where I want to say nothing you hear on the Juicebox podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. Don't listen to us, okay? Let's move on to Stephen. My doctor is saying I need to reduce my insulin usage to aid losing weight, but I'm not sure how to do that without letting my numbers run high. And by the way, Jenny, before you say anything, I think Stephen has tried a GLP and it hasn't jived well with him, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Great. Because that would have been my potential option, would be a GLP-1. Again, not knowing any lifestyle things here, it could also be that in order to reduce insulin, a broad look at lifestyle inclusive of intake of food. Are you meeting your need? It sounds like, you're wanting to lose weight. So oftentimes if weight is higher than what the body should normally support, then you are going to be a little bit resistant potentially. So adding in, again, some activity, and it doesn't mean going to the gym or buying a member, just take a walk every day. I mean, if you again, aren't doing any of these things, and then, as I said already, taking a hard look at overall intake comparative to your output of movement and whatnot during the daytime. Because I think, and I've said this so many times before, that we become really carb centric with diabetes, especially type 1 diabetes.
Yeah.
In terms of insulin use, that we end up covering, but the other parts, proteins and fats, they play a really big role in caloric intake. And if they're not being contained either.
Yeah, I find sometimes, and I don't know that this is Stephen's situation, but I find sometimes with people with type 1, they get so focused on like, can I bolus for this? And they figure out how to do it. They stop thinking about the food like calories, and it's just like a thing they conquered. They were like, I ate a thing and I didn't have a blip. And I don't think that that's his situation. But I mean, I also might say if you can't handle the GLP, metformin might help to some degree, no?
Yeah, and it looks like he said his doctor is suggesting a medical procedure. He doesn't want to do that. Tried GLP-1, works out almost every single day of the week, and eats less than 30 grams of carb a day. So
it's crazy.
Again, metformin, it could be an option. Absolutely. The extended release is usually the best tolerated. Starting dose is probably not going to show much, but once you get to the upper levels, usually around 2,000 milligrams a day of metformin is more the therapeutic amount.
Also, Stephen, I wonder if you couldn't find a doctor who'd be willing to like dabble in microdosing GLPs with you. Because right now they're stuck with that dosing strategy, right? They put you on Ozempic, they move you, put you to 2 and leave you there. Like, I mean, could 0.25 just make a difference for him? You know what I mean?
Well, and GLP-1 to GLP-1, there are many GLP-1s. I don't know which one you've tried. The older generation provided a little bit in terms of weight loss, but really nothing compared to the new generation of GLP-1s.
And I don't know if he tried Mounjaro or just, I'm not sure, but I do remember seeing online him talking about that it was not jiving well for him.
Yeah. I mean, the other, in terms of, again, the disclaimer of don't take any of this as medical advice, but as could be very beneficial. I mean, there are some supplementals such as berberine that are very beneficial in terms of insulin sensitivity that could help you, especially more at meal times, which is when it's recommended to take.
Yeah.
Allow cuttage, at least in bolus doses of insulin, depending on what your, sensitivity or body acceptance is to using that. That could be an option.
Also, I've seen people use digestive enzymes, magnesium oxide, stuff to help things move so that they don't feel backed up on the GLP. This one here, I'm interested in looping, but I couldn't figure it out. I've watched tutorials and podcasts, but could not loop. T1D Pal is a company that will set it up for you.
Yep.
Jenny, you guys don't do it though, right?
We do not.
No.
We do not. We absolutely 100% support all loopers. In fact, any of the do-it-yourself types of automated delivery systems, we 100% support. We will not build it for you. If there are, one of our educators, Catherine, she's very helpful in terms if there are, during your build, some questions and issues and whatnot that come up. She's very helpful in terms of helping direct you to the right adjustment or to clear an error or whatnot.
But as far as making the app, no. Yeah.
But we will not make the app. I do know that there is, I can't remember the doctor's name out in California. You have to be part of his practice, obviously, but he will build it. And then does it usually through something called Test Flight, right, which just downloads the app right onto your phone for use. So that is an option. I will tell you that T1 Pal, they do a wonderful job, but it is a monthly cost. Yeah, so just be aware that this is no one and done. They build it and then you're on your merry way. It's a monthly upkeep. So when there are upgrades to Loop, they do that for you behind the scenes, so you don't have to really keep up with any of that.
I might say, moreover, just go to the Loop and Learn Facebook group and ask if somebody will help you build it. I'm sure somebody would. And there's Mike is in our group. He would probably help you. There's definitely people who would help you get it built. And then, there's nothing really to maintain after that.
In the Looped group, I've seen people who have done weekend, we're going to get together at the library alcove.
Yeah, and they do builds together.
We're going to do the build all together. So you may want to outreach to your community too.
Sarah's saying if you were going to take a couple of units of glucagon to address a low, is there a general guideline for adults? I think I've seen 1 unit per year for kids.
Actually, it's great. You already know the guideline for kiddos. If you can treat a low yourself with the old school glucagon kit, the red kit. The other kit that can be microdosed is what you're really talking about here. Microdosing of glucagon is Gvoke makes not their usual one-shot done, but they also make the Hypo kit. The Hypo kit comes with a room temperature stable pre-mixed vial of glucagon. And it comes with a syringe that's empty. In general, you would usually use that syringe to draw it up and dose in an emergent situation. If you're microdosing that though, you would use an insulin syringe and you would draw up out of that vial. And in order to do it for adults, it's usually 1 unit per year of age under the age of 15. And then it's 15 units or 30 if you're redosing it. But 15 would be the usual sort of micro dose of glucagon to save you and treat a low that you can address yourself before getting lower. And then you evaluate to make sure blood sugar comes up, stabilizes up, and then technically you shouldn't have to redose.
I believe I've signed a contract that says I can't talk about that. So I'm moving on to the next one.
Okay. Well, I talked about it. So there you go.
I have nothing to do with you. Nellie loves the group. We love you, Nellie. Thank you very much. Any news about G7 and Omnipod 5? There's an LMR, and I saw something on their Facebook recently where they were looking for more people, but that's all I know about. And that's just, I don't know. Nobody tells me anything, just in case you're wondering. I don't have that.
They tell me less. Yes, so I have, you know more about that than I do.
Sometimes I know stuff for a couple of days before they happen, but not for weeks or months. And also, I think if they knew, they would tell us for certain. So I'm not sure why it's taken the time it is, to be perfectly honest. Susie says, do you think GLPs used reduced insulin needs are feasible for a slim, underweight kid? So I think if the person has a real need, like a real insulin resistance, like you have your carb ratio is 1 to 2 or something like that, there probably is a place where in the future they'll find smaller doses to help people. But there's no doubt in my mind, you will not be as hungry. It will be more difficult to eat. And if you're underweight or at low weight, it could end up being an issue for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it really does impact appetite. That's one of the biggest things that I hear from people. One, to a positive, when they're noticing the definite difference in appetite. Sometimes to the detriment, right? Where a person really just has to remind themselves to eat. And that's not the goal of this medication at all.
And listen, I'm on the GLP. I have to remind myself to eat some days. Like, there's no doubt I could go forever without eating and never notice it. But moreover, like, as we were getting Arden on it, there were times where we just had to take what we could get. And at one point, she lost, I think, more weight than we meant. Like, she lost a healthy amount of weight, but then she probably lost, I would say, another 7 or 8 pounds more than she should have. We adjusted her dose, and she's putting that weight back on now.
Yeah. But, and I think this is a really interesting question, too, because it's to the effect of thinking that with a child that doesn't have a weight issue, it sounds like, in fact, is more slim, to being a little bit slimmer than desired, and the want to reduce insulin.
Yeah, I wouldn't take a GLP just to use less insulin. Like, you'd need to have like a real insulin resistance issue, PCOS symptoms, weight gain that's just doesn't make sense based on your situation.
And or really heavy uses of insulin that suggest we have to change the pump site every single day because the reservoir is empty. Absolutely. But that most often, in fact, doesn't go along with a kid or an adult who is already fighting to gain or maintain weight.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think the GLP is just going to be a thing that every type 1 gets one day. I think it's going to be very specific uses. Let's see. Next question. Michelle said, so hard to bolus for anxiety. Our Miss 10, as she gets there, calms down and then she drops. Yeah, trust me, there's conversations all over the podcast about when Arden would sometimes shoot up for sports events and not always. And we'd end up bolusing for it. And then if she didn't get anxious, we gave her juice to cover it. But yeah, it isn't easy, that's for sure.
No, it's certainly not. And sometimes, again, depending on what your targets are, what your goals are, and also paying attention to how your child or your teen or yourself, how you feel, honestly, with that. Sometimes those sporting events are also really long, right? So you may get that spike on the way there. And if you don't bolus for it, as soon as the movement gets going, a good majority of kiddos, it comes down on its own.
It can drop on its own. Yeah.
So.
Hey, this isn't really a question, but I just wanted to say good morning to Yolanda. And, I hope she has a good day. And we all hate, and trust us, all of us hate this. So no one's excited about it. Jenny, are you super excited to have diabetes?
No. After 36 years, I could easily, if somebody knocked on my door and said, this is it, this is what you get, I'd be like, great.
Yeah. Jonathan said it took a long time for him to figure out he was type 2. He has an episode. If you want to hear it, it's a type 2 story.
Okay.
I asked Jenny to see how common the type 1. This is an old reply to another question. Okay. Let's see.
The type 1B.
Yeah.
It is not, as a response, it is not a common, but I also think in terms of proper diagnosis, you really have to have the right clinician to be able to say, this is not the typical. You have these sort of, visible things going on. You don't look like a classic type 1. You don't look like a classic type 2. It takes further testing. And I think that's also why, as I mentioned earlier with that, MODY I've heard a lot more about it in the past 5 years, but MODY is also one of those things that it's really poorly tested for in general. Yeah. So
what about this here that Cassandra's saying that Tresiba needs 3 days to get going for full coverage ish?
So this is for fully effective, meaning there's almost a ramp up to it getting going at the full effect. This I would say is about a 50-50 in those that I've seen using Tresiba specifically. I have a couple of little kids who definitely, if we are going to adjust their Tresiba, we have to give it about 2 to 3 days to actually see that it's truly making the difference that we would expect before adjusting again. And other people can go, like I went from Lantus to Tresiba myself and I was curious. So I went off my pump for a number of days just to test Tresiba comparative to what I knew about my Lantus years ago. And I had no issues with it whatsoever.
It was about the same.
So
okay. I'm putting this up because if Isabel or Nico or somebody who's looking can give Jennifer a list of the GLP episodes, that would be great. Somebody else says BC diabetes can build loop for you.
Correct. That's Canada, though.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean,
just FYI.
If you've got to cross the border to get it done, then if an A1C has remained 5.8 for the last year on Omnipod 5 manual, would you still consider looping? Or, I mean, there's trade-offs, maybe, but it sounds like you're doing a great job manually. If you're sleeping and you're, not having a bunch of lows, then I don't know. It seems like you're doing a great job to me.
Yeah. And it sounds like the question here is really, if I've got this and lows are not a big piece in the picture and I'm navigating this with good stability, then I think it's really, could I do better? Could I get better?
She says she's not sleeping.
Oh, not
yeah,
sleeping.
Then I'd turn it on.
Then
and
I
try.
would turn it on. Absolutely.
Yeah. Right. Because Susie, if you're all dead, but you've got a great A1C,
that's not worth it. No.
It won't matter. And I'm sure you can find a way to get Omnipod 5 and get your A1C there. You're just going to need to bolus, not an incredibly aggressive algorithm, but
and considering that Omnipod 5 has been being used in manual thus far, it does have some historic insulin data already.
Yeah. Your starting setting should be rock solid. That's for sure.
Right.
And then you just, because I know she has a young son, but he's still going to keep growing. So when you see those, like if he makes a leap in weight or needs or something, you might have to go back and do a reset to keep up with it once in a while.
And or the insulin to carbon sensitivity get adjusted, or if you've got a higher target set, lower the target, or, lots of little things.
Yeah. Sarah's saying, thank you. I don't want to breach my contract with Gvoke, that's for sure. We're going to start looping after Omnipod 5. We will need to get our settings dialed in. I'm a bit worried since we were never able to fine tune it in Omnipod 5. Yeah. Well, were you in Omnipod 5 manual and you were trying to fine tune it, or are you waiting for the algorithm to figure it out? Because those are probably two different things. Crystal, I have to tell you that I have recently taken the 3 episodes Jenny and I did, the math behind basal, insulin sensitivity, insulin to carb ratio, and I've actually turned the math into code and put it on my website, but I haven't had the nerve to put it public yet. It's disclaimered out the ass, so that I'm not really worried about, but like you can literally plug in numbers about yourself and get a starting place. But that math is available in those episodes for you to figure out for yourself too. You know what I mean? You know what I mean, Jenny? Like I can just put them up online and people can just say like literally like, this is how much I weigh. I'm an adult. I'm immediately active, etc. And it just spits out the information.
Yeah.
I had Isabel do it and it pegged her settings.
Wow.
So I want to do a smaller test group before I made it public.
That's a great idea. I'm quite sure that many people would donate their information.
Yes, to find out. But for the moment, there's the 3 episodes, the math behind, and you can definitely figure it out. Oh, Crystal will beta test it for me. Okay, send me an email and I'll
knowing
let
it
you say
isn't
it.
medical advice.
Oh no, I'm an idiot. You should definitely not listen to me. Have we heard anything about the Twin Health program? What is that?
Twin Health.
I don't know what that is.
I don't know what that is either. I'd have to look that up myself.
Let's look at this while Jenny's looking.
And whether it is confined by a state or is it a national?
Also, I'm going to be at the Touch by Type 1 event in Orlando. There's a link to it right there. It's free to get tickets. I don't know if somebody else is going to be there or not. I haven't talked to her.
Me?
Yeah.
I will be there.
Oh.
I already have topics.
Oh, well, you can come see Jenny and I in Orlando. When is that? Do you know?
Oh, it's September something.
Touch by, yeah, that link will take you to touchbytype1.org. You can go to the programs tab, hit annual conference. I'll get the date for you. September 14th.
Oh, September 14th. Oh. Okay.
Yeah. Are we going to go out to dinner afterwards?
Sure. You can
have your family with you?
Come to dinner with my family.
Oh, good. I have something to do in the evening.
There you go.
That's nice. All right. Anyway, touchbytype1.org if you guys want to see. It's completely free. It's actually, Jenny, I'm not going to ask you to out anybody, but it's a well put together event now.
100%. No, the Touch by Type 1 is lovely. I think this is the third year that I'll be there.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a wonderful event.
Jenny, look at the screen. We're working on that. We'll see. So far, we're not sure. We're working it out. We'd love to see a beta test. All right. So I'll send that to you. Can you test it too? Cassandra, sure. Like everybody just email me and I'll let you see it.
Yay.
Are we out of questions?
You can send it off to me too. I'll test it.
You want to try it?
Why not?
All right,
that's great. That's super awesome.
Okay.
But yeah, the Twin Health, Twin Health is interesting. They have the one that's connected to diabetes it looks like an advanced, like like digital, like whole body evaluation.
Okay.
So, but no, I've heard of other things that evaluate, taking like poop samples and that kind of stuff, right? To evaluate what kind of metabolism do you have and what should you eat and what shouldn't you eat. And some even go as far as suggesting the impact on glycemic, excursions and shifts and changes. I don't know if this looks a little bit more comprehensive, but yeah, there are lots of different things like this out there.
Okay. I don't know. I can tell you that I'm working on my gut health since I heard poop. And I watched...
That's actually one of my favorite words is poop. Isn't that weird? I don't know why.
Yeah, it's a little strange.
I just think it's kind of fun.
Did you watch the Netflix documentary about gut health?
I don't think so. Is it newer?
Okay. It's newer. Yeah. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Yeah. I found it really interesting. But one of the things they talked about was people... It's called Hack Your Health, The Secrets of Your Gut. I enjoyed it.
Okay.
And so... But there's a woman in there. This was the craziest thing. Do you have a second?
Yeah.
There is a woman in there who decided she couldn't afford to have like a company give her like a fecal implant, basically. So she went to her brother. Let's not get into the details of this, because I don't know exactly how she did it, but she got her brother's poop and put it in capsules and she took it. Now, her gut health improved. Right, you got to go watch this to hear the story. In case I'm getting it wrong,
fecal transplant is what you're talking about.
Yes, okay. Mm-hmm. She got hormonal acne that she'd never had before, but her brother struggles with it. So she stopped taking his poop. Her acne went away, and she thought, okay, but I want the good gut health. She went to her boyfriend, got his poopies, but started to pick up his depression.
Oh,
is that not crazy?
Wow!
Like, I don't know if that's right or not, but I was like mesmerized while I was listening. I was like, is this true? But anyway, I thought it was really crazy.
That is very interesting. I will have to look that up on Netflix.
Yeah. And Crystal, I'm making an episode about this and it's not done until I'm done, but I've been working with a gut health guy named Josh Deck and we record as we do stuff for ourselves. So it'll come out eventually. Come out like my poop. Omnipod 5 adjustment and basal rates for kids with rapidly adjusting needs, illness, etc. The lag with Omnipod 5 is rough. Do you have any thoughts on what you've seen in practice with Loop or Tandem being better, worse, etc.? Jennifer?
Yes, it's a great question. My personal as well as professional in practice, what I have seen is that Loop is, for lack of a better word, it's easier because there are adjustments that can be made more or less aggressive depending on what you're seeing in terms of sensitivities. The next of the ones mentioned here, Tandem does a lovely job as well. Tandem is the only company for their T-Slim or their Mobi that actually allows multiple profiles to be set and enabled for their Control IQ to work off of. So for kiddos who have a high growth period and then it goes back to, more stability or lower needs, you can have almost like a high, moderate or low need sort of profile. And you could enable those then for, again, the algorithm to work with. And that can be a huge advantage. You're right. And I think it's unfortunate because I think Omnipod 5 is a really lovely product and it does do a really great job, but it is by far the laggiest in accommodating.
Slow to respond to quick changes.
It really doesn't.
It's just not going to. Listen, Arden's using IAPS, which is like dynamically changing almost all of her settings, and it still doesn't move that quickly. Like it's moving fast. You know what I mean? Like it's not, unless you're going to go in there and have settings set up, which Omnipod 5 doesn't have, like, different profiles, then, that's the quickest way to change is with different profiles.
Yeah. And IAPS is definitely, above and beyond in terms of its decisions that it makes in its adaptive nature with the unannounced meal and the small micro bolus, and depending on what it sees in the rise and the rate of change and all it knows, it makes a decision on which of those it kind of navigates between. It's a fantastic.
Yeah, Arden kept a 6.3 at college. She was at college by herself for 6 months. She kept a 6.3 A1C, and I don't think she was pre-bolusing that much, and I don't know what she was eating half the time. She was pulling all-nighters, not eating, going all over the place. Like, it really held up, I thought.
I have to say hi to Donnie.
Oh, we're going to.
Because he says hi to both us.
Hey, Donnie, how are you?
Hi, Donnie.
Donnie's in a great episode of the podcast. It's got to be years old by now, but it's nice to see him.
He is, and you're just a great guy, Donnie. So it's nice that you said hi.
Look at you, Donnie, getting like love back. Jenny's giving flowers, as they say. If we were famous, that's what we would say. We'd say Jenny gave Donnie his flowers, but we're not famous, so we just say hello.
I'm not. Yes, no, by no means.
It is very nice to see him.
It is.
Started vitamins recommended with the Hashimoto's episode. I've seen improvements in several ways. Oh, that's great, Crystal. Fantastic.
It is great.
I'm doing a protocol right now of methylated vitamin B, NAC, milk thistle, and something else. And I've noticed I'm losing bloating in my upper stomach. So I'm working on that right now. We'll talk about it in the podcast one day.
That's great.
Yeah. So let's see. Profiles 20%. Yeah, I mean, profile. It's what you need. Sometimes is more or less. Mm-hmm. I think we only have Jenny for a couple more minutes.
5.
But let's celebrate with Jennifer. Diagnosed in '89 at 11 years old. She's 35 years going. Only on a sensor for the last 5 years. Her A1C is 6. She's self-taught, old school diabetes control. Good for you.
Nice
Congratulations.
job.
That's fantastic.
That's awesome.
Really very cool.
I'd be curious what kind of glucometer she was started with, because that's right around
35 years ago?
Yes, that's right around the time that I was diagnosed.
She probably had that guillotine like poker that you had too.
Yes, it was like it banged down on your finger, and I'd hold the platform slightly above my finger so that it didn't quite kill my finger each time. Yeah.
Amy, you can feel free to send that email to Omnipod and tell them what you think. Can you tell us more about the enzymes? I tend to get constipated. Digestive enzymes, I like pure encapsulations. Mm-hmm. They make one, but you can find them probably at most health food stores. If you have type 1, which I know many people here do, you might see a slowing in your digestion. They could help to supplement at your meals. Mm-hmm. And do you have anybody... I was just going to say for that one, also hydration. It's really, really important is hydration. And oftentimes even hydration, you think about that being just water, and you can overhydrate with just water, and that can create enough issues too. So hydration with some baseline electrolytes can be very beneficial. Yeah. Also, Azra, I'll tell you what, 400 or 800 milligrams of magnesium oxide a day, and you will take and use it at bedtime. Then it can work on your gut all night. Yeah. Go ahead. You want to poop? Do that. Start with 400, but after like 2 or 3 days, if you're not going, go to 800 and it will happen. Do you have any clients, Jenny, with gastroparesis that's using a GLP? I do not personally, no. Okay. I mean, I could check with the other clinicians in our office and see if they do, but I have not, in all the years GLP-1s have been out, I've not had anybody use it. Mm-hmm. I'm interested to see how it goes, because are there going to be a whole generation of type 1s that this is not available for because they actually have clinical gastroparesis, they have nerve damage that slows their digestion? Or are we going to start learning more about people just having gut health issues with type 1? Right. And, they don't have actual nerve damage. They just digest their food slowly. Right. So, exactly. Interesting. Jenny, you have to go, I imagine? I have 3 minutes. 3 minutes? Okay. You guys have 3 minutes to ask Jenny a question. There's a link up here now to the Diabetes Pro Tip series, but you can get all this at juiceboxpodcast.com. Of course, nothing we said here today was advice, medical or otherwise, and you can email Jenny at work if you'd like to work with her with that link that's right up there. Yay. This is the first time we've done this, but we got up to 70 people at one point, and we held 50 people real consistently. So I thought this was a great success. Fabulous. Yes. Yeah. Super exciting to talk to people like this, especially on a Friday and launch into the weekend. Right. Who knows, Jenny, if this is going to be a thing we do. Oh, have a great day as well. Yep. Okay, everybody. Well, take care. I'm going to hang out for a couple minutes, but Jenny's going to go back to work. Are you literally going to jump into a call and help somebody? I'm jumping into a call, yes. What kind of plant is in your window? It is a Christmas cactus. Oh, does it flower often? Well, that's the interesting thing. So it flowered around Christmas time, which was lovely because it doesn't always. And then in April, it got all these blooms again. And then the blooms on a Christmas cactus last for quite a while. Mm-hmm.
And it just started losing, you can see some of the dead ones on it, but it just started losing those blooms like recently. So yeah, Christmas cactus, it's a lovely plant.
I have a giant one. I can never make flowers come out of it. When the flowers come out, I don't know what I did to make it happen. So
yeah, you have to, sometimes you have to kind of shock it. It's almost like bulbs that you take out of the ground and then you put them in a dark place. And then when it starts getting warm and the ground unfreezes, you plant them, and that sort of kind of sparks them. So Christmas cactus, I did not do this. So it just was random, but my basement is also, which is where my office is, it's also colder than the rest of the house. So I think when I brought it down here, I moved office spaces. I think the cold kind of shocked it.
Okay.
So anyway, there you go.
A lot of thank yous, Jenny, here from everybody.
Thank you. This was really wonderful. I like the live option to do this.
Michelle stayed up in Australia to talk to us. It's 1 a.m. there.
Oh.
That lovely?
Good job.
Oh, and I think Isabel makes a good point. There are maybe 30 episodes of Ask Scott and Jenny where you can hear us pontificating ad nauseum about your questions.
Yes.
So, all right, Jenny, thanks so much. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, guys, that was it. Should we do this again? I literally threw this on Jenny like yesterday afternoon. I was like, would you do something tomorrow at 10 o'clock with me? And she was like, yeah, sure. Maybe we'll do this again. I mean, there's a lot of people here. It was great to see everybody. I want to thank you all for your support. Remind you seriously, you subscribe to the podcast. If you don't, it helps the show immensely in Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your audio, etc. Please, if you're in the private Facebook group, follow the public page, because this thing you see here with the chat, it really only works through the public page. It's not the software's fault. Facebook blocked the software from getting into the private groups. So if you want to be part of that, this is a great place to do that. If you love the podcast, leave a 5-star review wherever you listen, 5 stars and a great review that will help somebody else be interested in the show. Please, if you're an Apple Podcast, don't forget to turn on your automatic downloads in your settings so you don't miss an episode, and so that I get downloads, because downloads is what the advertisers care about. And if you want Jenny and I popping up like this in the middle of our day, Scotty got to make money somewhere. So keep pumping out those episodes, please. Very, very helpful. Spotify as well, if you care. People are saying goodbye. I'd like to say goodbye. You thought it was awesome. That was great. Appreciate that. I think we'll do it again. Hopefully, I saw a number of you clicked on Jenny's link. So Jenny will, not that she did this for business, but, a couple of you check her out. I'm sure she'll definitely come back. Great weekend. Oh, thank you. Oh, my God. Please. I'm not camera ready. We will definitely try to do it again. Calvin, hey, Scott, any chance for an annual subscribers to have all the episodes uncensored? Calvin, I am working on it slowly. It is very expensive. Every time I uncensor an episode, it costs a significant amount of money through the editing. So I'm at least going forward, we're trying to do it, but it's another problem. Like even producing two different files, it increases my cost by like twice as much. So I'm trying to build up enough money where I can use that money to pay for that. Okay. All right. You guys are still chatting with each other. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I'll see you later. I'm going to try to make this, when I end the stream, I'm going to try to save it and make it available, but it should be floating around in Facebook for you for quite some time. Take care. Have a great weekend. Type 1 diabetes can happen at any age. Are you at risk? Screen it like you mean it. Because if just one person in your family has type 1, you're up to 15 times more likely to get it too. So screen it like you mean it. One blood test can help you spot it early. And the more you know, the more you can do. So don't wait. Talk to your doctor about screening. Tap now or visit screenfortype1.com to get more info. And screen it like you mean it. Arden started using a contour meter because of its accuracy, but she continues to use it because it's durable and trustworthy. If you have diabetes, you want the Contour NextGen blood glucose meter. There's already so many decisions. Let me take this one off your plate. ContourNext.com/juicebox. I want to thank the Eversense CGM for sponsoring this episode of the Juicebox Podcast and invite you to go to eversensecgm.com/juicebox to learn more about this terrific device. You can head over now and just absorb everything that the website has to offer And that way you'll know if Eversense feels right for you. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. You have questions? Scott and Jenny have answers. There are now 19 Ask Scott and Jenny episodes. That's where Jenny Smith and I answer questions from the audience. If you'd like to see a list of them, go to juiceboxpodcast.com, up into the menu, and click on Ask Scott and Jenny. Hey, thanks for listening all the way to the end. I really appreciate your loyalty and listenership. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. The episode you just heard was professionally edited by Wrong Way Recording. WrongWayRecording.com.